Hey guys, welcome back to Real Talk Cinema, the place where we dive deep into movies, their hidden meanings, behind the scenes facts, and powerful storytelling. Today we're unpacking Detachment, 2011, a raw, emotionally charged drama that forces us to confront the brutal realities of modern education, broken homes, and human disconnection. Henry Barthes is more than just a substitute teacher, he is the embodiment of emotional exile. His life is not simply one of movement, but one of deliberate distance, a man who drifts through time and space without ever leaving a mark, as though he is afraid his fingerprints on the lives of others might be too heavy, too permanent. Henry chooses the role of a substitute teacher not by chance, but as a perfect shield. It is the one profession where he can temporarily exist, contribute just enough to fulfill his duty, and vanish before anyone can pull him into their orbit. His very job is built around impermanence, and he clings to it like a life raft, because permanence for Henry is a source of pain. His life is a series of revolving doors, stepping in and out of other people's worlds, leaving no trace behind, convincing himself that this is the safest way to survive. But behind this carefully curated detachment is a man crushed by unresolved grief. His mother's suicide is not just a tragic event in his past, it is the foundation upon which his emotional walls have been constructed. The film doesn't have to show us the moment of her death. We can feel it in Henry's every breath, in the haunted silence that fills the spaces between his words, in the way his body tenses when someone tries to get close. He is a man stuck in suspended mourning, terrified to love, to commit, to be needed, because needing leads to loss, and loss is unbearable. When Henry steps into the crumbling public school, where most have given up, he is not there to fix anyone, not there to be a savior. He simply wants to pass through without disturbance. Yet life, as it often does, begins to gnaw at the barriers he has so meticulously built. The students, some of them angry, some of them desperate, begin to chip away at his armor. The teachers, weathered and bitter, unknowingly expose pieces of Henry's own hidden despair. The decaying halls of the school are more than a backdrop. They are a physical manifestation of Henry's inner world, hollowed out, graffiti-stained, structurally unsound. Adrien Brody's performance is a masterclass in subtlety. Henry's emotional suppression is so complete that his breakdowns are almost imperceptible to those around him. But to the audience, they are deafening. Every scene where he stands before a classroom, teaching literature with mechanical detachment, yet slipping traces of personal agony into his lessons, feels like watching a man pleading to be understood without the courage to say the words. He carries his pain like a ghost, haunting the lives of others while refusing to be haunted himself. And yet, deep inside, Henry wants connection. His kindness to Erica, his moments of softness with Meredith, his protective instinct toward his students, all betray a man who hasn't stopped caring. He has simply convinced himself that caring is dangerous. His fear is not of failure. It is of being present when something he loves inevitably falls apart. He is terrified of being a witness to loss once again. Detachment for him is not a choice, it is survival. The most profound tragedy of Henry Barthes is that he is painfully aware of his own emotional imprisonment. He knows he is trapped, he knows his detachment is a shield, but he has worn it for so long that he can no longer take it off. His journey through this story is not one of triumph or redemption. It is a quiet, suffocating battle with himself, a question of whether he will allow even the smallest crack in his emotional armor, whether he can trust another human being with the fragile, bleeding parts of himself. Henry doesn't need a climactic rescue or a grand transformation. His power lies in his quiet resistance, the moments where, despite everything, he chooses to offer a hand, a word, a gesture of care. These moments are so small they almost vanish, but they carry the weight of a lifetime of pain. In Henry Barthes, Detachment gives us a character who is not a savior, not a martyr, but a mirror. A painful reflection of the ways we guard ourselves, the ways we disappear behind our roles, and the aching truth that sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones we spend our entire lives trying to outrun. The school that Henry Barthas steps into is not simply dysfunctional. It is collapsing from the inside, a silent graveyard where hope has been buried beneath years of neglect, bureaucratic failure, and emotional abandonment. The walls are cracked, the paint is peeling, the halls echo with the distant, fading sounds of what education was once meant to be, a place of growth, curiosity, and human connection. But now, it is reduced to a sterile battlefield where teachers no longer teach to inspire. They teach to survive. The students have become aggressive, indifferent, or completely disengaged, not because they were born that way, but because the system has taught them to expect nothing. They are not seen as individuals with dreams and fears. They are processed like numbers, shuffled from room to room under the cold stare of standardization, where test scores matter more than the hearts beating in the seats. The staff, worn and hollow, drag themselves through the days as if they are inmates in a prison of their own making, fighting silent wars with disillusionment, exhaustion, and the creeping realization that they are no longer part of something that matters. This decaying environment is not just physical, it is spiritual. It is the result of years of political apathy, underfunding, and the ruthless commodification of education. Administrators scramble to meet quotas, to reduce discipline problems on paper, to pretend that everything is under control while the foundation rots beneath them. The school is a microcosm of a society that has forgotten how to care for its future generations. The children act out not because they are inherently bad, but because no one has consistently shown up for them, listened to them, or fought for their potential. When systems fail, the people within them begin to fail themselves. What makes this portrayal so painfully real is its honesty. Detachment does not offer a fairy tale where one teacher changes everything. It doesn't romanticize the struggle. Instead, it plunges us into the trenches, where the victory is simply getting through the day, where the quiet loss is that most students will walk out of these doors having never been truly seen. Henry School is a place where the idea of learning has withered, where education has become a transaction, a mechanical process designed to produce compliant citizens, not thinking, feeling human beings. As Henry moves through these deteriorating halls, the school becomes a living metaphor for his own crumbling emotional walls. Both are spaces that once held promise but are now falling apart, suffocated by years of neglect. The failing school system is not just a setting, it is a character itself, breathing decay, exhaling hopelessness, and slowly consuming the people trapped within its walls. The film forces us to look at these schools not as statistics in a government report, but as living, breathing environments that shape lives, that can either build futures or quietly destroy them. And the most brutal question detachment asks is this: when we build systems where no one is truly connected, when we prioritize numbers over souls, how long until those systems and the people within them collapse completely? Meredith is perhaps one of the most heartbreaking characters in Detachment, a teenage girl drowning in isolation, spiraling under the crushing weight of depression, bullying, and the brutal indifference of the world around her. She walks the school halls like a ghost, carrying a desperate need to be acknowledged, to be validated, but instead, she becomes the target of relentless torment. The bullying Meredith endures is not just physical, it is emotional annihilation. She is ridiculed, ignored, and erased by her peers, and tragically dismissed by the adults who should have been her lifeline. Meredith is not acting out violently like some of the other students. Her rebellion is quieter, more dangerous. It is a slow retreat from life itself. She slips through the cracks of the system, becoming invisible to the very people who are supposed to protect her. What makes her story so painful is that Meredith does not scream for help in ways the world is willing to hear. She shows her suffering through her art, through her withdrawn posture, through the sadness that hangs from her like heavy chains, but the teachers, buried in their own exhaustion, fail to truly see her. Society has a devastating habit of punishing girls like Meredith, girls who don't fit the mold, who are sensitive, who carry their wounds on their sleeves instead of masking them with rebellion or bravado. She is swallowed by a world that demands emotional resilience but offers no tools to build it. Henry sees her, though. Perhaps it is because he recognizes in her the same quiet devastation that lives inside him. There is a subtle, unspoken bond between them, two people who have been taught by life to expect abandonment. Henry reaches out to Meredith in brief, hesitant gestures, a kind word, a glance that lingers a little longer, a conversation that gently suggests he understands what it feels like to be discarded. But even Henry, trapped in his own detachment, cannot fully rescue her. His own emotional walls prevent him from being the anchor Meredith desperately needs. The tragedy is that sometimes noticing someone's pain isn't enough. Sometimes the system has already failed them too deeply. Meredith's suicide attempt is one of the most shattering moments in the film. It's not framed as a shock, it's framed as an inevitability in a world that consistently looked through her instead of at her. Her story forces us to confront the brutal reality that some cries for help are silent, and if we don't learn how to listen to those silences, we will continue to lose people like Meredith. Detachment doesn't offer her a redemption arc wrapped in happy endings, because in real life, not all stories end in recovery. Some end in heartbreak. Meredith's journey is a devastating reminder that our failure to connect, to truly see and hear those around us, has consequences that are often irreversible. Erica is a raw, tragic portrait of lost innocence, a teenage girl forced to sell her body on the streets to survive. But what breaks the heart is not just her circumstances, it's the way the world has become numb to girls like her. Erica isn't hardened or cold. She's fragile, painfully vulnerable, clinging to whatever scraps of kindness she can find in a world that has brutalized her, used her, and tossed her aside like garbage. When Henry crosses paths with her, she isn't some one-dimensional symbol of teenage rebellion. She is a child, abandoned by the system, unseen by the people who should have cared, desperately searching for a place where she can feel safe, even if only for a fleeting moment. Henry's decision to take her into his home is not driven by romanticism or some savior complex. It is a complex, quietly desperate act by a man who sees too much of himself in her. Erica represents everything Henry is running from: vulnerability, connection, emotional responsibility. By offering her shelter, Henry isn't just helping Erica, he is cracking open his own armor, allowing himself to feel something dangerous again. What makes their relationship so profoundly moving is its purity. There is no exploitation, no inappropriate tension, just two broken souls finding brief refuge in each other's presence. Erica's childlike need for safety, her simple joy in mundane comforts like clean clothes and a soft bed, exposes the brutal poverty of affection she has endured. For perhaps the first time, someone is offering her kindness without expecting anything in return. Henry cooks for her, speaks to her gently, and even though he constantly struggles with his instinct to remain emotionally distant, he cannot ignore the fact that Erica is teaching him something vital: how to care without fear. Yet Henry's internal war is relentless. He questions whether he is doing the right thing, whether he can handle the weight of being someone's protector, whether his heart can survive being open again. He knows that loving people means risking the unbearable: loss, betrayal, grief. But Erica, in her own broken way, becomes a catalyst for Henry's quiet awakening. Through her, Henry begins to reconnect with the humanity he has buried under years of self-imposed detachment. Erica doesn't need to be saved in the cinematic sense. What she needs is to be seen, to be held in emotional safety, to be given permission to exist without fear. And Henry, despite his terror of attachment, provides that, even if only for a little while. Their connection is one of the film's most tender, gut-wrenching threads, a subtle, painful reminder that sometimes what saves us is not grand gestures, but simple, genuine kindness. Erica's story forces us to confront the devastating failures of the world outside the classroom, the way we discard the most vulnerable and pretend not to see them until they disappear completely. In Erica, Detachment asks the painful question: if someone had reached out sooner, how many lives like hers could have been different? While Henry Barthas quietly wrestles with his personal grief, the other teachers in Detachment are each silently waging their own wars, slowly crumbling under the unbearable weight of a system that has consumed their passion and spat them out as hollow shells. These are not just educators, they are soldiers in a losing battle, trapped in classrooms where discipline has disintegrated, where students no longer see them as figures of respect, but as irrelevant obstacles. Their faces are marked by exhaustion, their voices drained of conviction, and their dreams buried beneath years of unspoken despair. The film does not sugarcoat their decline. It gives us raw, painful glimpses of people who once entered the profession to make a difference, who once believed they could shape young minds, but who now barely believe in themselves. Some lash out in frustration, some retreat into numb compliance, and some, like Lucy Liu's character Miss Madison, reach their emotional breaking points, where anger and heartbreak collide into explosive confrontations with their students. Miss Madison's anguish is especially brutal to witness. She is a woman who desperately wants to matter in these students' lives, but every day she is met with walls of apathy and disrespect. Her breakdown is not staged for drama, it is the eruption of years of accumulated neglect, disappointment, and emotional suffocation. Her rage is not directed solely at the students, it is directed at the system that has abandoned both them and her, at a culture that has devalued education, at administrators who only care about appearances while the core rots away. Miss Madison is not just angry, she is grieving the death of her purpose. When she shouts, she is screaming against the silence that has consumed her soul, and she is not alone. Other teachers in the film, some silent, some sarcastic, some quietly vanishing, are all different versions of what happens when you stay in a broken system for too long. They don't wear capes, they don't have miracle solutions. They are people who have been slowly worn down by years of failure, disappointment, and emotional burnout. They have lost their faith in the very thing they once cherished: connection. And the most tragic part, most of them know they are losing this battle. They know they are sinking, and yet they show up every day because even in their deepest hopelessness, a tiny part of them still wants to believe that maybe, just maybe, they can still reach someone. Detachment paints these teachers with painful honesty. It does not judge them, nor does it glorify them. It simply shows them as they are, human, fractured, and drowning in a system that no longer cares about their survival. They are the silent casualties of an educational battlefield that has forgotten the value of human connection. Through their stories, the film forces us to ask, how long can people carry the burden of a crumbling system before they too collapse? The school's principal, played by the brilliant Marcia Harden, is not a villain. She is a tragic figure caught in the suffocating grip of appearances, politics, and inevitable failure. Principal Dearden is trapped in a system that forces her to prioritize numbers over souls, test scores over human lives, and disciplinary reports over the actual well-being of the children and staff. Her role is painfully complex because she is not heartless. She is exhausted. She is worn thin by the constant barrage of failing metrics, unsupportive leadership from above, and public scrutiny from a world that demands results without offering the resources to achieve them. The brilliance of her character is that she embodies the silent war of school administrators everywhere. Those who are expected to hold together crumbling walls with nothing but spreadsheets and forced optimism. Principal Dearden's desperation oozes through every meeting, every phone call, every moment she puts on a brave face. She is a master of performance, constantly pretending that she is in control, when in reality, she is barely holding on. Her forced smiles, her robotic delivery of motivational speeches to her defeated teachers are not acts of dishonesty, they are acts of survival. She has learned that in this system, you either fake stability or you are replaced. And the heartbreaking truth is, she genuinely wants to believe in the words she says. She wants to believe that things can improve, that policies will save them, that teachers can endure a little longer. But the system she serves is deaf to human need. It only listens to statistics. Her silent collapse is one of the most devastating undercurrents of the film. She is a woman balancing on the edge of irrelevance, terrified of losing not just her job, but her identity. When she is eventually fired, it is not presented as a shocking twist. It feels like the final, cruel confirmation that the system does not care who you are, how hard you've tried, or how many battles you've fought. The scene where she quietly packs her things, reduced to a nameless casualty of educational bureaucracy, is almost unbearable to watch. It is not a loud moment, it is a soft, suffocating heartbreak, the sound of defeat settling into someone's bones. Principal Dearden is a symbol of what happens when leadership is stripped of humanity and forced to become a cog in a machine that measures success only by numbers. Through her, Detachment delivers a brutal message. The system doesn't just break students, it breaks the people who are trying to save them. Her story reminds us that sometimes failure is not the result of incompetence or lack of effort. Sometimes failure is the natural consequence of being trapped inside something that was already broken long before you arrived. At the core of Detachment lies a suffocating, all consuming theme: emotional isolation. A silence so loud it echoes through every scene, every character, every unfinished sentence. The film doesn't just tell the story of disconnected people, it submerges us in their isolation, forcing us to feel the ache of lives lived at a distance. Henry Barths walks through life like a ghost, expertly avoiding attachments, building walls so thick that not even his own emotions can penetrate them. His isolation is self imposed, a defense mechanism forged through years of abandonment, loss, and silent suffering. He knows the pain that comes with connection. He knows it so intimately that he has chosen to live a life where detachment seems safer than the risk of caring too deeply. Yet this isolation is not unique to Henry. Every character in the film, from the teachers to the students to the administrators, carries their own version of this unbearable solitude, suffocated not by the absence of people, but by the absence of real human connection. What makes this theme so brutally honest is how Detachment reveals that emotional isolation doesn't always look like loneliness. Sometimes it wears the mask of routine. Sometimes it hides behind sarcasm, behind anger, behind numbing professionalism. The teachers stand before classrooms filled with students, yet they are emotionally alone, speaking words that no one truly hears. The students are packed into crowded hallways, yet they drift like satellites, disconnected, unseen, and untouched by real empathy. Even Erica, who physically sleeps in the same space as Henry, is emotionally stranded, searching for a safety she can't find, not because people aren't near her, but because no one has been willing to truly stay. Henry's isolation is particularly suffocating because it is so tightly wrapped in guilt and inherited trauma. His mother's slow, degrading death left him with scars that prevent him from building bridges to anyone, even those who are reaching out for him. His brief connection with Erica threatens to dismantle his emotional armor, but he is terrified, not just of losing her, but of feeling anything at all. Detachment masterfully shows us that isolation can feel safer than intimacy, because when you are alone, no one can leave you. Yet this illusion of safety is exactly what traps Henry and everyone around him in lives of quiet despair. What the film does so effectively is confront us with a chilling question. In a world where everyone is hurting, why is it so hard to reach each other? Why do we keep building emotional fortresses, pretending that detachment is protection, when in reality it is a slow, silent form of self destruction? Detachment forces us to sit in this discomfort, to realize that human connection, though terrifying, is the only lifeline we truly have. Through Henry's journey, we come to understand that healing does not come from running away from pain. It comes from choosing to stay, to risk caring, to break through the walls that we have spent our lives building. Henry Barthes' visits to his dying grandfather form one of the most quietly devastating threads in Detachment, revealing a raw, personal window into the roots of Henry's emotional paralysis. These moments are not just plot devices, they are haunting reflections of inherited pain, of generational wounds passed down like unwanted heirlooms. Henry's grandfather is trapped in a decaying body, abandoned in a bleak nursing home, his mind slowly slipping into the fog of dementia. The way Henry interacts with him is both tender and painfully distant, as if Henry is performing a duty he doesn't fully understand but feels compelled to fulfill. He brings flowers, sits quietly by the bedside, and listens to fragmented stories that no longer make sense. Stories that feel like echoes of a life long forgotten by everyone else. In these scenes, the weight of abandonment presses heavily on both men, bridging the gap between past and present in a way that cuts deep. What makes their relationship so emotionally complex is that Henry isn't just visiting out of love, he is visiting out of guilt, out of a desperate, unspoken attempt to hold on to a connection that feels like the last fragile link to his own humanity. His grandfather is more than just family, he represents the unresolved trauma that defines Henry's life. The old man's failing body, his scattered memories, and his quiet suffering all mirror Henry's own internal decay. Henry's life has been shaped by watching the people he loves slowly disappear, emotionally and physically, and his grandfather's deterioration is the living, breathing embodiment of that loss. Yet, despite his detached exterior, Henry cannot look away. He keeps showing up. He keeps sitting in that room. He keeps enduring the painful silence because part of him still clings to the impossible hope that some connection, however broken, can still be salvaged. In many ways, these scenes are where Henry's vulnerability is most naked. Away from the chaos of the classroom, away from Erica and the pressures of his job, Henry is simply a grandson, conflicted, burdened, and quietly terrified of what is slipping away. His conversations with his grandfather, though sparse, are drenched in sorrow. It is as if Henry is both confronting the inevitable death of his last familial tie and simultaneously reliving the abandonment that defined his childhood. His grandfather's fading existence becomes a cruel metaphor for Henry's own emotional collapse, a reminder that everything, no matter how tightly you hold it, will eventually wither, fade, and vanish. Detachment uses these scenes to brutally underline the cyclical nature of pain, how wounds, if left unhealed, echo through generations, leaving scars on those who were never even part of the original story. Henry is a man trapped in that echo, desperately trying to find meaning in the debris of his fractured family. Through his grandfather's slow descent, the film forces us to face one of life's most brutal truths. Sometimes, we are left to carry the weight of people who no longer remember us. And sometimes, we continue to love them anyway. One of the most haunting elements of Detachment is its visual storytelling. Its atmosphere is not just a background, it is a silent character that follows Henry like a shadow, amplifying the emotional weight of every scene. The color palette is deliberately washed out, muted with cold blues, grays, and harsh whites that seem to strip the world of warmth, almost as if joy and life have been drained from the environment itself. The classrooms feel sterile and suffocating. The hallways echo with a kind of silence that is louder than noise, and even the homes of the characters seem empty, stripped of personal touches, as though they were never meant to feel like sanctuaries. Every frame feels intentional. Every shot lingers just a little longer than it should, forcing us to sit with the discomfort, to taste the heaviness that the characters cannot escape. This is not a film that comforts the viewer. It unsettles you. It forces you to absorb the quiet despair embedded in the walls, in the streets, in the eyes of the people who have long given up. The camera movements in Detachment often feel restless, floating, unanchored, perfectly mirroring Henry's own emotional disconnection. At times, it almost feels like we are eavesdropping on the lives of these broken people, catching them in moments when their masks slip, when their pain seeps through in the smallest, most human ways. The film also incorporates moments of documentary-style confessionals, where characters speak directly to the camera in raw, unscripted bursts of honesty. These moments shatter the boundary between the viewer and the characters, pulling us in closer, almost uncomfortably close, to their wounds. It is as if the characters are begging us to understand, pleading to be seen, if only for a few seconds. But perhaps the most brilliant aspect of the film's visual language is how it communicates the passage of emotional time. Scenes often dissolve into each other, without clean transitions, creating a dreamlike, almost fragmented quality that makes it hard to tell how much time has passed. Just like the emotional numbness that consumes Henry. Life blurs, days pass, nothing changes. The visual structure traps us in Henry's mindset, where moments bleed together and meaning is elusive. We are not given the comfort of clear milestones or neatly packaged resolutions because Henry himself is adrift, and the camera ensures that we feel that drift in our bones. The subtle visual metaphors, the graffiti covered walls, the cold metal desks, the flickering fluorescent lights, are not just aesthetic choices, they are silent reflections of the psychological decay all around. The school is not just a place, it is a crumbling monument to failure, a place where hope comes to die. The streets where Erica roams are painted as equally unforgiving, cold spaces where survival has replaced childhood. Through this masterful visual storytelling, Detachment does not simply tell us that the characters are trapped. It makes us feel it, it makes us live it alongside them. Among the many broken souls drifting through Detachment, Meredith is perhaps the film's most heart wrenching portrait of invisible suffering. A student who has been completely abandoned by the system, by her peers, by her family, and most devastatingly, by herself. Meredith is not loud. She is not a troublemaker. She does not beg for attention. She is the kind of student the world so easily overlooks, the quiet girl sitting in the back of the classroom, slowly disappearing in plain sight. Her emotional pain is suffocating, but it remains largely unseen, drowned under layers of cruel bullying, indifferent teachers, and a system too exhausted to notice one more fading child. Meredith's tragedy is not wrapped in dramatic outbursts. It is wrapped in silence, in the way her eyes barely hold contact, in the way she walks through life as if she has already accepted her own invisibility. Meredith's story is a brutal indictment of how the system fails those who suffer quietly. She is mocked for her weight, ridiculed for her awkwardness, and crushed by the relentless pressure of being seen as worthless in a world obsessed with appearances. Her self-esteem has been eroded to dust by years of cruelty, both at school and at home, where emotional support is a distant dream. There are no lifelines for her, no adults who notice her collapsing spirit, no peers who offer her kindness. Her slow emotional descent is not treated as a subplot. It is a mirror to the central theme of the film. When no one intervenes, when no one reaches out, children disappear, not always physically, but emotionally, spiritually, piece by painful piece. One of the film's most shattering moments is when Meredith's pain finally surfaces, not through anger, but through desperate, heartbreaking vulnerability. Her cry for help is soft, but the weight of it is unbearable. The system has failed her so completely that her only escape seems to be self-destruction. Her breakdown is not designed for cinematic spectacle. It is designed to quietly destroy you. You feel the unbearable ache of a young girl who has been screaming inside for years, but no one was listening. And when Henry finally offers her a brief, fleeting moment of compassion, it feels both heroic and tragically too late. His simple gesture of kindness toward Meredith becomes one of the film's most powerful moments, not because it saves her life, but because it is one of the few times someone genuinely sees her. Detachment uses Meredith's story to ask a brutal question. How many children like her pass through the system completely unseen, silently drowning, while the rest of the world keeps moving? It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that saving someone does not always mean offering grand solutions. It sometimes means simply noticing them, seeing their pain, and daring to care when no one else will. Through Meredith, the film delivers one of its most devastating truths. Some of the loudest cries are silent. Beneath Henry Barth's carefully constructed detachment lies a dark, festering wound that has shaped the very core of his being. The unresolved guilt and trauma surrounding his mother's suicide. This isn't just a backstory detail, it is the ghost that haunts his every step, the invisible weight he carries into every classroom, every conversation, every sleepless night. Henry's childhood was not simply marked by loss, it was devoured by it. He was forced to watch his mother deteriorate, consumed by her own despair, until the unbearable choice to end her life shattered what little stability he had left. This event did not just steal his parent, it stole his ability to trust in permanence, to believe in connection, to accept that love could last without dissolving into tragedy. What makes Henry's grief so suffocating is that it has calcified into guilt, a corrosive, lingering belief that perhaps he could have done something to save her, even though he was just a child. His stoic exterior, his refusal to form attachments, his constant emotional distancing are not acts of indifference, they are acts of self preservation. He has spent his entire life building walls, not because he does not feel, but because he feels too much. His detachment is his armor against the terror of ever losing someone again. The moments in the film where we see flickers of his past, brief, fragmented memories of his mother's suffering, are not presented as grand revelations, but as invasive thoughts that break through his defenses, paralyzing him in unexpected moments. These memories haunt him not with clarity, but with suffocating emotional weight. Henry's relationship with Erica and his students subtly triggers this buried trauma, forcing him to confront emotions he has long buried. Every time he pulls away, every time he denies himself the possibility of closeness, we can feel the silent echo of his mother's absence whispering in his ears. You couldn't save me, you can't save anyone. His guilt poisons his ability to hope, convincing him that any attachment is a ticking bomb waiting to explode in his hands. Yet, despite his desperate attempts to remain emotionally numb, Henry is drawn toward people who are broken, who are on the edge of their own destruction, perhaps because he is endlessly trying to rewrite his mother's story through them, trying to save in others what he couldn't save in her. Detachment does not offer Henry the comfort of resolution. His mother's suicide is a scar that remains open, a truth he will likely carry for the rest of his life. The film's brutal honesty is that some wounds don't heal, they simply become part of you. Through Henry's struggle, we are reminded that the most painful ghosts are not the ones that haunt our homes, but the ones that live inside us, whispering that we are forever bound to our past failures. His journey forces us to confront the hardest truth of all. Sometimes, the people we most desperately want to save are already beyond our reach, and sometimes, all we can do is keep moving forward with the weight of them still inside us. Detachment is not just a personal story about Henry. It is a brutal, unfiltered indictment of a collapsing educational system that has lost its soul. The film portrays the school as a crumbling institution where the weight of bureaucracy, apathy, and exhaustion has completely crushed the original mission to care for and uplift students. The teachers walk through the halls with hollow eyes, drained of hope, battling not only the disrespect and violence from the students, but also the crushing expectations from administrators who seem more concerned with test scores than with saving lives. The system is no longer about education. It has become a machine, cold and mechanical, where children like Meredith and Erica are processed, labeled, and forgotten. The film paints a devastating picture of how a system meant to nurture has turned into a place where both teachers and students are emotionally starving. What's especially heartbreaking is that many of the teachers are aware of this failure. They feel it pressing down on them every day. They entered the profession with idealism, with the desire to make a difference, but years of fighting a losing battle have eroded their spirits. Some, like the principal played by Marcia Harden, are so overrun by pressure that they become emotionally numb, disconnected from both the staff and the students. Others, like the more passionate but broken teachers Henry meets, cling to their last threads of empathy but are slowly being consumed by despair. There are no villains in this system, only victims. Teachers are not monsters. They are soldiers in a war no one is winning. The students are not irredeemable. They are children who have been emotionally abandoned by the very structures meant to protect them. The film does not sugarcoat the brutality. The classrooms are battlegrounds, discipline is ineffective, and the attempts to reach the students often crumble under the weight of generational neglect, poverty, and trauma. These are not simply bad kids. They are the products of homes fractured by abuse, addiction, and societal failure. The educational system cannot solve these wounds alone, but instead of providing resources, the system buries its teachers under standardized tests, rules, and quotas, stripping them of the human connection that might have been their only weapon. In one agonizingly real scene, a teacher breaks down in front of her class, pleading for someone to care, exposing the raw nerve of a profession that is silently collapsing. Henry, as a substitute teacher, embodies the tragic in between. He is a ghost in the system, temporary, disposable, always moving. He touches lives, but never stays long enough to fix anything. His presence is a painful metaphor for how the system itself treats both teachers and students: quick replacements, superficial interactions, fleeting connections that never last. Through this lens, detachment forces us to ask, what happens to a society that abandons its children? What happens when schools become prisons of emotional decay instead of havens of growth? The film offers no easy answers, only the haunting reality that when an entire system stops caring, the collapse is not loud. It is silent, slow, and devastating. Henry Barth's emotional walls are not just self defense mechanisms, they are the carefully constructed barriers of a man who has been bleeding inside for years and has learned that feeling too much can destroy you. Throughout Detachment, we watch Henry move through life like a ghost, present but never truly there, engaged but forever at arm's length. His detachment is not arrogance, nor is it indifference. It is a deeply rooted survival strategy born from childhood trauma, abandonment, and the crippling weight of unresolved guilt. Henry has mastered the art of emotional invisibility, allowing him to navigate a world full of broken people without ever fully offering himself to anyone. He is the man who leaves before he can be left, the man who offers temporary kindness but never permanent connection, the man who walks away because he is convinced that staying will only lead to pain. What makes Henry's walls so heartbreaking is that they are not impenetrable out of stubbornness. They are there because he is terrified of what might happen if they collapse. His interactions with Erica, Meredith, and his dying grandfather are moments where these walls crack, where his carefully guarded heart briefly emerges before he quickly pulls it back. It is as though Henry is trapped in a cycle of longing and retreat. He desperately wants connection, but the moment he edges close to vulnerability, his past screams at him to run. In his mind, attachments are dangerous. They are invitations to loss. His mother's suicide taught him that loving someone means risking the unbearable. His failed attempts to reach students who remain unreachable taught him that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you cannot save people from themselves. Henry's detachment extends beyond his professional life. It saturates his existence. He moves from classroom to classroom as a substitute, intentionally choosing a career that allows him to never stay, to never root himself, to always leave before things can grow too deep. He lives in a sparse apartment that feels more like a waiting room than a home, surrounded by muted colors and minimal personal touches, reflecting his refusal to build anything permanent. Even his brief moments of emotional engagement are quickly swallowed by his instinct to retreat, as though he believes he is undeserving of the very connections he quietly craves. The tragedy of Henry's emotional walls is that they do not truly protect him, they isolate him. They trap him in a cold, self-imposed exile where he is forever hovering near the edges of life but never fully participating in it. Detachment shows us that survival is not the same as living. Henry survives by building these walls, but in doing so, he denies himself the chance to heal, to truly feel joy, to find meaning in connection. His journey is a profound meditation on how the scars of our past can shape the architecture of our present, and how sometimes the most dangerous place to live is inside our own carefully constructed emotional fortresses. In the bleak, emotionally starved world of Detachment, where pain echoes louder than hope, the film reveals that sometimes it's the smallest acts of kindness that can momentarily save a person from drowning. These moments are not grand rescues, not life-altering transformations, but fleeting sparks of connection that remind someone, even briefly, that they matter. Henry Barnes, despite his carefully guarded detachment, cannot help but offer these small kindnesses. It's in the way he picks up Erica from the streets
and gives her shelter without asking for anything in return. It's in the way he lends a flicker of his attention to Meredith, the bullied, broken student, offering her a brief glimpse of being seen. These moments are quiet, subtle, and heartbreakingly human. They do not save the world, but maybe they save a day, or a minute, or a single breath. What makes these moments so powerful is that they are almost accidental. They emerge from Henry's deeply buried humanity that refuses to stay dead, no matter how much he tries to suppress it. He doesn't set out to be a hero. He doesn't even believe he's capable of making a real difference. But his simple acts of compassion ripple through the broken lives around him, leaving tiny, fragile imprints that outlast his own fleeting presence. The beauty and tragedy of these kindnesses lie in their impermanence. Henry doesn't stay long enough to witness lasting change. He offers a sandwich, a bed, a kind word, and then he moves on. But in those small gestures, he plants seeds that may or may not grow. And the film forces us to question whether these brief, fragile connections are enough in a world that so often feels indifferent. Detachment is brutally honest in showing us that life rarely offers redemption in grand cinematic ways. Sometimes, all we have are these tiny moments where one human quietly reaches out to another, and that is what keeps us from sinking completely. Henry's kindness to Erica does not erase her trauma, but it gives her a momentary refuge. His support for Meredith does not undo the years of neglect, but it gives her a glimpse of being valued. The film suggests that salvation isn't always about fixing someone. It's about showing up, even if just for a moment, even if just to say, I see you. I care that you exist. In a world where most people are too broken, too busy, or too tired to notice each other, Henry's small kindnesses shine like faint, flickering lights in the dark. They may not save anyone in the grand sense, but they remind us that sometimes survival hinges on nothing more than being briefly acknowledged, briefly loved, even if by a stranger who cannot stay. Principal Carol Dearden, portrayed by Marcia Harden, is one of the most tragically complex figures in Detachment. Not because she is a villain, but because she is the perfect embodiment of what happens when leadership is suffocated by a failing system. Carol does not walk through the halls with authority. She drags herself through them with the crushing weight of accountability that has nothing to do with real education. She is trapped, caught between administrators who demand results, teachers who are emotionally collapsing, and students who are spiraling out of control. Her life has become an endless cycle of chasing numbers, dodging lawsuits, and enforcing meaningless policies, all while the human core of her profession disintegrates around her. The system demands data, discipline, and results, but gives her no weapons to fight the real war, the emotional decay of the children in her care. Carol's story is quietly devastating because she is not a bad person. She is simply lost. Beneath her administrative rigidity is a woman who once wanted to make a difference, but who has been so relentlessly beaten down by the system's demands that she has forgotten how to fight for what really matters. Her breakdown is subtle but unmistakable. Her eyes are tired, her patience is thin, and her desperation leaks through in brief, broken moments when she realizes she is failing the very people she set out to protect. The film shows us that her authority is an illusion. She has no control over the tide of dysfunction that washes over her school every day. She is expected to manage chaos, but the truth is she is drowning in it. One of the most painful elements of Carol's journey is the lack of support she receives from the very system that holds her responsible. She is blamed for poor performance, for declining scores, for teacher burnout, for student violence, but no one gives her the tools to address the root causes. She is isolated, overworked, and quietly crushed under the impossible expectations placed on her shoulders. Even in her moments of decision making, we see that she is playing defense, constantly reacting, never able to build or nurture. Her leadership is reduced to firefighting. She is extinguishing problems instead of preventing them, and eventually the fires become too many. Detachment uses Carol to deliver a haunting message. The failure of the system is not about individual incompetence. It's about a structure that demands the impossible from its leaders
while stripping away their humanity. Carol is a mirror to Henry in many ways. Both are people who wanted to help, but who have been pushed to emotional exhaustion by forces far beyond their control. Her final moments in the film are devastating in their quietness. There is no grand exit, no fiery confrontation, just a slow fade, a quiet resignation to a fight she can no longer endure. Through Carol, the film asks us to confront an uncomfortable truth. How many good people are being quietly destroyed by systems that were designed to fail them? Erica's character in Detachment is one of the most tragically innocent victims of societal neglect. A teenage girl thrust into a cruel adult world far too soon, forced to sell her body just to survive another night. She's not hardened like the streets she walks. She is still a child trapped inside a cycle of exploitation, desperately searching for something she has never been given: unconditional love. Her presence in the film is a haunting reflection of how many young lives slip through the cracks, invisible to the systems that were designed to protect them, but have instead abandoned them. Erica's brokenness is not subtle, it radiates in every glance, every word, every trembling attempt to understand why she is always the one being used and discarded. She does not know how to ask for love because the only language she's ever learned is transaction. For Erica, affection has always had a price. When Henry brings her into his home, what unfolds is not a savior story. It is a deeply uncomfortable, fragile attempt at human connection between two people who are emotionally stranded. Erica's clinging to Henry is heartbreaking because it is not just gratitude, it is desperation. She isn't just seeking shelter from the streets, she is begging for a reason to believe she is worth saving. She attaches herself to Henry as if he's the last person on earth who might still care, the final hope in a world that has offered her nothing but survival through degradation. She is terrified that this fragile moment of safety will dissolve like all the others in her life. And when she tries to offer her body to Henry, it is not a gesture of seduction. It is a painfully misguided plea. This is all I know how to give. This is the only way people have ever wanted me. If I offer this, maybe you won't leave. Henry's rejection of her offer is a profound turning point, not just because he chooses not to cross a moral line, but because in that moment, he gives Erica something she has never experienced before: being wanted without being used. His kindness, though hesitant and incomplete, begins to unravel the only survival logic Erica has ever known. But this does not instantly save her. The scars she carries are too deep, the damage too embedded. Henry's home is temporary, just like everything else in her life. His care is real, but it comes with the quiet tragedy that he is incapable of staying. His own emotional detachment, his lifelong fear of connection, will not let him build anything permanent, not even for someone as vulnerable as Erica. Their fragile relationship is a mirror of the central theme of detachment. Broken people cannot always save other broken people. Sometimes the best we can offer is a brief refuge, a fleeting breath of safety before life drags us apart again. Henry provides Erica with that breath. He gives her a moment where she is not a commodity, not a lost child, but simply a human being worthy of care. And perhaps, in the painful universe of detachment, that moment, though not enough to fully heal her, is the one thing that might keep her alive. The one memory she can hold on to when the streets come calling again. Erica's story lingers long after the credits roll because it leaves us with questions we cannot easily answer. How many Ericas are out there, slipping into the night unnoticed? How many children have been taught that their value is transactional? And how many of us, like Henry, wish we could stay and fix everything, but instead only have the strength to offer a passing kindness, a temporary shelter from the storm? In the brutal honesty of detachment, we are forced to confront that sometimes the smallest acts are all that remain in a world that never gave enough. Meredith, the overweight, relentlessly bullied student, is one of the most quietly devastating characters in Detachment. She is the perfect portrait of a soul slowly eroding under the weight of constant emotional violence. In every scene, Meredith's body language screams what her voice cannot: her slouched shoulders, her downcast eyes,
the way she shrinks into the background as if willing herself to disappear. She is a child crushed not by a single traumatic event, but by the accumulation of hundreds of small daily humiliations that have convinced her she is worthless. Meredith doesn't lash out in anger. Instead, she retreats into a suffocating isolation, enduring the cruelty of her classmates and the indifference of her teachers with heartbreaking resignation. She has internalized the message that she is invisible, that her suffering doesn't matter, that no one will ever come for her. Henry Barths, despite his own walls, is perhaps the first person to look at Meredith and actually see her, not as a problem to be managed, but as a human being whose pain is drowning her. His brief moments of compassion toward her, particularly when he defends her against bullies and acknowledges her talent in photography, provide her with the tiniest spark of validation. But here lies the tragedy. Henry's kindness, though genuine, is not enough to pull her from the abyss. Meredith is far too deep in her despair, and the system around her is too broken, too distracted, too busy chasing test scores to notice a student slowly crumbling right in front of them. The adults in her life fail her, not because they are all cruel, but because they are overwhelmed, disconnected, and incapable of offering the sustained support she desperately needs. The most gut-wrenching part of Meredith's story is that her cries for help are subtle. She doesn't scream, she doesn't create chaos, she quietly hands in a hauntingly dark photograph, a silent message about her inner world. But no one is really listening. She is the student who suffers in silence, the one who is most likely to slip through the cracks because her pain is not loud enough to be disruptive. In one of the film's most harrowing moments, Meredith ultimately chooses to take her own life, a final, irreversible act that leaves a hollow echo throughout the school and within Henry's soul. Her suicide is not framed as a shock. It is a brutal inevitability in a world where she was never truly seen. Detachment refuses to offer neat resolutions. Meredith's death is a devastating reminder that sometimes, even when we try to help, we arrive too late. It challenges us to ask, how many Merediths have we walked past? How many children are quietly collapsing under the weight of isolation while we chase deadlines, quotas, and superficial measures of success? Henry's sorrow in the aftermath is suffocating because he knew deep down that she was slipping away, and yet he, like the rest of us, was caught in a system that made it nearly impossible to catch her. Meredith's story is not just a subplot, it is the emotional core of Detachment's cruel message. When we fail to truly see each other, when we prioritize performance over people, when we drown in our own detachment, innocent lives are lost. Not dramatically, but quietly, in the shadows where no one was watching. One of the most emotionally piercing layers of Detachment is the subtle but powerful revelation of Henry Barth's own childhood trauma, which quietly shapes every moment of his adult life. His stoic exterior, his carefully maintained emotional distance, and his instinct to push people away are not random. They are the scars of a life deeply marked by generational wounds. Through brief, painful flashbacks, we come to understand that Henry's mother suffered her own brutalization, and that as a young boy, Henry was not merely a witness to abuse, he was shaped by it. The memory of his mother's suffering, and perhaps his own, haunts him relentlessly, driving his detachment not as a choice but as a survival mechanism. Henry isn't simply emotionally distant, he is emotionally armored, terrified that allowing anyone too close will either destroy them or destroy him. This inherited pain is the invisible weight Henry carries into every classroom, every home, every fleeting connection. His past is not something he discusses openly, but it leaks out in his moments of silence, in his trembling anger, in his desperate attempts to protect the vulnerable without ever truly believing he can succeed. His relationship with his grandfather, who is slowly dying in a nursing home, is a raw tether to that past. It's a relationship bound by guilt, responsibility, and a quiet, aching love that Henry can barely express. The visits to his grandfather's bedside reveal the profound loneliness that saturates Henry's life. His only living family is fading away, and with it, the last thread tying him to where he came from.
What makes Henry's struggle so painfully human is the way he unconsciously reenacts the very emotional distancing that likely destroyed his own family. He wants to help Erica, he wants to save Meredith, he wants to be a positive force, but when they get too close, his instinct is to retreat. His detachment is both his shield and his prison. He believes that by remaining emotionally distant, he is protecting others from the pain that seems to follow him like a shadow. Yet the irony is cruel. In trying to prevent harm, he perpetuates disconnection. He fears becoming like those who failed him, yet his refusal to let others in pushes him toward the same isolation that fractured his childhood. The generational trauma in detachment is not just about abuse, it's about silence, about the things we inherit that we do not know how to name. Henry is a man lost in that silence. The flashbacks show us that even as a boy, he learned to numb himself, to suppress, to vanish emotionally, because that was the only way to survive. His entire adult life is built on that learned invisibility. The film never gives us the full details of his past because it doesn't need to. The fragmented memories, the lingering sadness in his eyes, the way he instinctively closes doors on people who love him, tell us everything we need to know. His story is a quiet tragedy of a man who carries his mother's pain, his own pain, and the weight of students like Erica and Meredith, yet cannot bear to carry his own heart openly. Through Henry, Detachment delivers a brutal truth. Generational trauma doesn't always scream, it often whispers, infecting every relationship, shaping our choices, and creating cycles of detachment that can last a lifetime. Henry's emotional numbness is not failure, it is a wound so old he no longer feels the cut. And the question the film leaves us with is piercing. Can people like Henry ever truly escape the ghosts of their past, or are they forever bound to love from a distance, afraid of becoming the very thing they once survived? Detachment is not just a story about individuals, it is a searing, brutal indictment of the modern education system itself, which the film portrays as a cold, mechanical factory of failure. The system is not depicted as broken by accident. It is systematically designed to measure students and teachers by numbers, statistics, and test scores while ignoring their emotional, psychological, and social realities. The film paints schools not as places of growth and discovery, but as battlegrounds where exhausted teachers, disillusioned administrators, and traumatized students wage silent wars every day. There are no heroes here, only survivors trapped within a structure that dehumanizes everyone it touches. Detachment forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that schools have become transactional spaces where human lives are reduced to grades, attendance sheets, and performance evaluations, with little room for genuine connection or empathy. Throughout the film, the teachers are not villains, but casualties of a system that demands perfection with no resources. They are held accountable for student failure, even though the root causes, poverty, abuse, broken homes, emotional neglect, are entirely beyond their control. Teachers like Henry, despite their best intentions, are worn thin by the crushing weight of a system that prioritizes metrics over meaning. The school is suffocating beneath layers of bureaucracy, legal threats, apathetic parents, and a student body that is emotionally starved and academically disengaged. The few moments of human connection that do occur are rare and fleeting, like sparks in a vacuum that are quickly extinguished by the surrounding indifference. One of the most cutting critiques Detachment makes is that the education system, as it exists in this world, does not care about saving students. It only cares about avoiding liability, hitting performance targets, and surviving public scrutiny. The administrators are shown scrambling to prevent lawsuits, protect the school's reputation, and comply with policies that do nothing to address the actual needs of the students. The teachers are forced into impossible roles. They are educators, therapists, bodyguards, and disciplinarians, all while fighting their own internal battles. And the students, brutalized by the system and by their own chaotic lives, lash out not because they are inherently bad, but because they have learned that aggression is the only language that gets a response.
Detachment doesn't offer solutions because it is not a film about fixing the system. It is a film about exposing it, laying it bare in all its brutal bureaucratic coldness. It asks us to confront the chilling possibility that in many schools, the machine has already won. The human element, the part that requires time, patience, emotional investment, is being choked out by paperwork, funding cuts, and impossible demands. The tragedy is that even the few who try, like Henry, are destined to burn out or pull away because the system does not sustain or reward those who care. It quietly grinds them down until they too must detach to survive. Through its unflinching portrayal, Detachment forces us to ask a haunting question. When a system is built to measure but not to nurture, how many young lives are we sentencing to silence, violence, and self destruction? And when will we finally admit that education cannot be reduced to numbers?
Because behind every grade, every suspension, every expulsion is a story we chose not to hear. In the final moments of detachment, we witness the inevitable collapse of Henry Barthas, a man who has spent his entire life carefully balancing on the edge of emotional detachment, only to find that the walls he built to protect himself have ultimately become his prison. Throughout the film, Henry moves like a ghost through the halls of the school, through his own life, through temporary connections with people like Erica and Meredith, always careful never to truly plant his feet, never to truly belong.
But as he accumulates the grief of losing Meredith, the quiet guilt of failing Erica, and the suffocating weight of his own unresolved childhood trauma, Henry's emotional armor begins to crack. The man who has spent years hiding from pain is finally cornered by it. There is nowhere left to run. Henry's breakdown is not cinematic or explosive. It is devastating in its quietness. The crushing loneliness that has followed him for years finally overtakes him, and for the first time, he allows himself to feel the full force of what he has buried. His life has been a long pattern of observing from a distance, caring but never staying, touching but never holding on. His detachment was once a survival tool, but now it has hollowed him out, leaving behind a man who has lost the ability to believe he is worthy of being saved, or even of saving others. Even his moment of refuge with Erica is fleeting. He gives her safety, but he cannot give her permanence. He is too afraid, too broken, too convinced that if he opens his heart completely, he will destroy both of them. The ending leaves Henry as a man drowning in sorrow, but still walking, still teaching, still existing, because that is the brutal cycle of detachment. There are no Hollywood endings here, no grand victories, no miraculous healings. People like Henry continue on, carrying unbearable grief silently, performing their duties, while emotionally bleeding underneath. His final scenes are a quiet surrender to the pain he has long ignored, and yet it is in this surrender that we see perhaps his most honest moment. For the first time, he is not hiding, not performing, not escaping. He is simply broken. Detachment closes without offering redemption or certainty. It leaves Henry and us with the aching realization that sometimes the wounds are too deep, the walls too high, the years too heavy. Sometimes survival is all we can manage, and sometimes that survival comes at the cost of never truly feeling whole. This ending hits with brutal honesty. We may meet people like Henry in our own lives, those who seem distant, who pull away, who refuse to let us in, not because they do not care, but because they care too much and fear that their touch will only bring harm. Detachment forces us to see these people not as cold, but as profoundly wounded. And in doing so, it leaves us with a quiet, painful question. What happens to the caregivers, the quiet heroes, the broken hearts who spend their lives holding up others while slowly crumbling inside? 6/16, 10:06 a.m. Adil. In Detachment, the recurring imagery of the empty classroom is one of the film's most powerful yet quietly devastating symbols. On the surface, it appears as a mere background, a transitional shot between scenes, a visual pause. But beneath that stillness lies a world of pain, neglect, and untold stories. The empty classroom is more than an architectural space, it is a physical embodiment of absence.
It represents all the students who have passed through the system unnoticed, all the dreams that were quietly extinguished, and the countless connections that never had the chance to take root. This classroom, barren and silent, echoes with the ghosts of those who should have filled its seats, not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. The silence in these rooms is deafening because it speaks volumes about the emotional void permeating the education system and, by extension, society. Each empty chair symbolizes a young life marked by trauma, abandonment, or despair. These are not simply empty seats, they are spaces where hope once sat but was forced to leave, where innocence was lost to pain and neglect. The blackboards, sometimes covered in hastily written lessons, become mute witnesses to a process that has become mechanical and hollow, where education is reduced to a checklist rather than a human experience. The empty classroom confronts us with the brutal truth that presence alone does not equate to engagement, and attendance does not equal acceptance or healing. For Henry Barthes, these empty classrooms are painfully reflective of his internal world. They mirror his own emotional desolation and detachment from life. He teaches in rooms that during the day may buzz with the restless energy of students, but at night transform into cold, echoing chambers where silence reigns supreme. These spaces are filled with bodies during school hours, yet remain hollow of spirit, much like Henry himself, who physically inhabits the world but remains emotionally withdrawn, a spectator in his own life. The classrooms symbolize his own struggle, surrounded by people, yet profoundly alone. They are places where attempts at connection falter, where cries for help are muffled by walls and ignored by systems too overwhelmed or indifferent to respond. Moreover, the empty classroom is a metaphor for the emotional bankruptcy of the system. It reveals a place where children come to learn facts and figures, but often leave without feeling safe, understood, or valued. The educational environment, as depicted in the film, is one where bureaucracy, apathy, and trauma collide, turning a space meant for nurturing growth into a space where survival requires emotional shutdown. The silent classrooms remind us that many students come to school carrying burdens too heavy to bear, the scars of abuse, poverty, neglect, and violence. And when these wounds are ignored or unseen, the classroom becomes a place of isolation rather than belonging. The film's focus on this silence also highlights society's collective failure. The empty classroom stands as a monument to what happens when systems designed to educate and protect instead become indifferent cages. It forces viewers to reckon with the fact that the emotional neglect of these children is not accidental, but systemic, a reflection of how communities and institutions have failed to prioritize the mental health and well-being of the most vulnerable. Each empty desk is a silent plea, an unanswered call for help that echoes long after the school day ends. Ultimately, the empty classroom in Detachment is not just a backdrop, but a powerful, haunting symbol of loss of innocence, potential, and connection. It embodies the film's central message about detachment not only as a personal defense mechanism, but as a societal epidemic. The silence challenges us to listen harder, see deeper, and act more compassionately before the rooms are emptied for good. It leaves the audience with a lingering question. As these chairs remain empty, as voices remain unheard, how many lives will slip away unseen, and what will it take for us to fill these spaces with hope again? In Detachment, amidst the overwhelming despair and bleakness, the film delicately threads moments of fragile human connection that shimmer like brief sparks of light in an otherwise dark world. These fleeting connections between Henry and Meredith, Henry and Erica, even between students and their teachers, are the rare instances where hope breaks through the heavy fog of isolation and pain. They remind us that even in the harshest environments, the human spirit still reaches out, yearning for understanding, comfort, and love. Henry Barthes, a man seemingly locked away behind his own walls of detachment, occasionally lets down his guard enough to touch others' lives. His interactions with Meredith, the troubled teenage prostitute, reveal a tender, protective side buried deep beneath his stoic exterior. These moments are charged with a bittersweet intensity, because while Henry offers Meredith safety and compassion, he also knows that their connection is fragile, temporary, a flicker destined to be snuffed out by forces beyond their control. Meredith's own vulnerability echoes Henry's loneliness, their bond a fragile bridge spanning two wounded souls, navigating a world that has largely failed them.
Similarly, Henry's efforts to help Erica, a neglected and abused student, showcase the painstaking attempts to weave empathy and care into a system that often feels cold and indifferent. Their relationship is an imperfect, uneven dance, marked by Henry's hesitations and Erica's resistance, but it is also a testament to the power of genuine human care, no matter how brief or flawed. These moments serve as poignant reminders that despite the detachment around them, people still crave connection and can offer healing, even if just in small doses. These brief sparks of humanity emphasize the film's profound message. Emotional connection is a lifeline that can pull people out of despair,
Yet it remains elusive and fragile for many. Detachment doesn't romanticize these moments. They are fleeting, vulnerable, and often shadowed by the harsh realities that relentlessly close in. But their very existence is powerful. They symbolize resilience and the enduring need for compassion in a world that often seems indifferent. By highlighting these fragile threads of connection, Detachment asks us to recognize the small but vital acts of kindness and understanding that can make a difference in lives overshadowed by trauma and neglect. The film leaves us with a subtle, hopeful whisper that even when detachment feels inevitable, the human heart can still reach out, touch, and perhaps begin to heal. One of Detachment's most haunting themes is the profound way past trauma invisibly shapes the present lives of its characters, particularly Henry Barthas. His emotional distance isn't simply a personality trait, it is a defense mechanism forged in the crucible of his own unresolved childhood pain. Throughout the film, Henry's scars are invisible but deeply etched, wounds that shape his worldview and his interactions, silently dictating how he relates to the broken students around him. This underlying trauma forms the foundation of his detachment, creating a barrier that protects him from further hurt but also isolates him from genuine connection. The film delicately peels back layers of Henry's guarded exterior, revealing glimpses of a painful history filled with abandonment, neglect, and loss. His reluctance to get close to others, his refusal to let people in, and his muted suffering all point to the heavy burden of trauma he carries silently. In this way, Henry becomes a living embodiment of how unaddressed emotional wounds from childhood can ripple into adulthood, impacting not only the individual but also those around them. His past shadows his every decision, every interaction, and every moment of vulnerability, illustrating the long, difficult journey from trauma to healing. Similarly, the students Henry encounters are each marked by their own hidden traumas, violent homes, broken families, and emotional neglect that manifest as anger, withdrawal, or destructive behavior. The film underscores how trauma is